Welcome back to Intergalactic Forms. Last time we learned how to build procedural shaders to texture our spaceship in the plugin Red Giant Geo. This time, we're going to be learning a variety of effects and techniques to build out intergalactic exteriors for your space scenes. We'll be making starfields, nebulas, planets, and more. As always, my name is Blake Rizzo. Let's dive right in. All right, welcome back to Intergalactic Forms. We are going to be starting out with a classic, a staple. I've done this effect 100 times. That's right, it's the Starfield effect, fully 360. You can move the camera anywhere, the stars can flicker. But anyways, we're going to dive right in. It's a very fun effect. We're going to create a new composition. We're going to call this Starfield. I'm going to make it just regular HD. You can make the resolution whatever you want. I'm going to make it 15 seconds because who knows, we might reuse this a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We're going to be starting out with a new solid. Go ahead and right click new solid, and we're going to call this Horizon. We're going to be using a plugin called Horizon. So let's go ahead to the effects and presets. We're going to go to Red Giant Particles in 3D. If we scroll down, we can see Horizon. You can see that we've reorganized all the effects into different categories now. We're going to go ahead and drag that onto the solid. And you can see right away that it makes this gray gradient. And that's kind of what's going on here. If I create a new camera, which is a 3D camera, let's make this a 2-node camera because it makes it a little easier. The 28mm, that's pretty fun. Go ahead and hit OK. You can make the camera whatever you want. But now if I go up to the camera orbit around cursor tool, I can now rotate the camera. It's hard to see here, but we're actually moving around in 3D space. And this is a fully 360 backdrop. And no matter where we move the camera, you are now granted with a background. Well, we are going to be making a Starfield background. The next thing we got to do is, because if we click into Horizon here, Horizon is now creating a gradient. You can see right here, it creates a gradient with lines and colors. We can make it have more colors. Oh yeah, now we're in Party Town. I'm gonna go to Image Map, Layer, and we need to create something for Horizon to essentially reference and be our starry backdrop. So let's create a solid, right click, new solid, and we're gonna call this Starfield reference. Now here's the big thing about this. This needs to be significantly bigger than the actual composition size. In fact, the width needs to be twice as much as the height. So we can go ahead and click on the height, copy, and then paste that, and then times 2, and now it will be twice as wide. I'm actually also gonna multiply each one of these by 4. This will make sure that when the image is wrapped around a 360 that it won't look pixelated. However, you really got to judge your computer and how much resolution you feel like you need for the shot. So make sure to kind of dial this number to kind of match your computer specs and also the type of resolution of your footage. Also make sure that it is a white solid. Whatever the color is what the stars will be. Okay, scrolling out here, we can see that this layer is indeed very big. We are going to go ahead and apply a CC starburst onto this layer, and you're going to see a bunch of dots appear. Very, very cool. If we hit the space bar, we hit play, we can see it looks like that Windows background when your computer went to sleep. We're going to go ahead and turn the speed down to 0, and then we're going to turn the size down and then adjust the scatter, and immediately you can start to see, we start to get this, it looks like stars. We're going to play with these values here in a second. Let's go back to our Horizon layer. Oh yeah, Party Town. We're going to go ahead and go to Image Map, and we're going to go to Layer, and we say Starry Reference Layer, and we're going to make sure that we hit Source, Effects, and Mask. That means the effects will be in there as well. And boom, check out that. We have a starry background. We can also adjust this as we're going, and adjust the starry background. But if we go ahead and go to the orbit around cursor tool and then click in orbit, we now have a fully 360 star map that we can use in the back of our scenes. If we want to adjust the density of the stars, we go starry reference layer. We can adjust the scatter. We can make it more scattered, less scattered, all sorts of stuff. If you want your stars to flicker, there's a fun little trick you can do. Now, in this case, there's no atmosphere between us and the stars, so that would kind of minimize the flickering, but sometimes it's a nice effect to have. So to make the stars flicker, we're going to apply some fractal noise onto our starry reference layer. So that's the layer which you applied the CC starburst to. Fractal noise will now composite fractal noise, which looks like this, on top of our stars. So let's go ahead and let's adjust the scale here. And we're going to get it to be so it's kind of small. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm also going to set the blending mode of the fractal noise to multiply. This means the darker areas of the noise will darken the stars as the noise passes over it. This will help flicker the stars, which is kind of cool. So I'm just going to start by playing with the contrast. The more contrast, the more sharper the flicker. We can play around the brightness. I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to animate the offset turbulence by clicking the stopwatch here. Go to the end. Move this up maybe, and then we're gonna see how fast this goes. Okay, that's way too fast. Let's make it slower. I keep dialing these keyframes until I get a speed that I like. Let's go a little faster. What I'm also going to do is I'm also going to animate the evolution, and we could add a keyframe at the beginning and end of our composition, but what I really like doing is I like hitting option click on the stopwatch, which opens up the expression controls. And I know, for the first time when I looked at the expression controls, I was a little scared. We're going to write a simple expression to animate the evolution of our fractal noise. We're going to go ahead and type in time, which is the current time, times 200, which basically means as time is passing on, it will then multiply by 200, and then the result will then affect the evolution. The higher the number that you multiply time by, the faster the fractal noise will evolve. So let's see here. Nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring back our stars, and let's see what this looks like. So if I hit spacebar, we can see that the stars are flickering. We can see this even more if we were to go ahead and make a quick adjustment layer and then apply some optical glow. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to search, optical glow, beautiful glow. And then if I turn up the scale, turn down the intensity, make it just subtle, we'll be able to see this flickering a lot more. And that's how you make flickering stars. Now let's talk about how to create this Milky Way cloud that you see when you look up at the night sky. Okay, we're going to start by duplicating our starry reference layer. This is the giant layer that we had to use to create to kind of reference for our 360 backdrop. We're going to go ahead and delete the fractal noise and the starburst. So now it's just a giant white solid. We are going to then, it's going to work better if we pre-compose this. And we're going to go to leave all attributes in Starfield. We're going to call this Milky Way and hit OK. What's great about this is it maintains the size of the image, but if we double click and then go into the composition, it's actually the real size of this. It's just a really big composition. We're going to be using this to make the Milky Way. In my main comp, I'm also going to go ahead and duplicate horizon because this is where we're going to be putting in our Milky Way. It's going to be mapped around 360. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the Starfield and just hide it for now. Cool. We'll even rename it. Milky Way horizon. Nice. And then we're going to set this layer to be the Milky Way. Well, now we got to build the Milky Way. Okay, now that we're in the Milky Way comp, we're going to go ahead and apply a fractal noise onto this layer. Okay, so now I'm going to mask out a cloudy shape. I'm going to go up to the ellipse tool up here and click in the center of the comp, and holding command, I can kind of make this perfectly stretched out circle. And if we go back to our main comp and reveal the Milky Way, we can now see that this is showing up in our shot. I can go to orientation and distort and just kind of rotate this into our shot where it kind of looks good. Nice. Maybe I'm going to make this a little bit more narrow. Cool. So you can see the edges are really, really sharp. We're going to add a roughen edges. We're going to go ahead and drag this onto our layer. And right now you're not going to see anything because we need to dial some of these settings up. Let's go ahead, and I always kind of have to mess around with this. Okay, we mess around with the border, and then we change the edge sharpness. Okay, yeah, we definitely want a softer edge. Fractal influence, we want more fractal influence. We're going to adjust the scale. Nice, look at that. We're seeing the edges are getting kind of rougher. Fractal noise is actually being applied to these edges. And we actually, you'll see that like we need to basically make it feel like the edges of the fractal noise, like how it's eroding away. Like it needs to feel like it belongs with the same level of noise scale. So let's go ahead and adjust the scale. So, okay, too big, that's too little. We need to turn this down. I now start experimenting around with the rough and edges settings with the fractal noise. I try to get them to kind of live in the same universe. I mess around with the border to make sure it's the correct size, all to get it to look good. One thing we're also going to do is I'm going to apply yet another fractal noise on top of this. If you look at the Milky Way, there's a lot of shadows from like galactic clouds on there. And I'm just going to add another layer of fractal noise onto here. And then I'm going to set this to multiply. And then you can see it kind of starts to darken things out a little bit. I'm going to start messing with the scale here. And it's supposed to feel like there are a bunch of clouds in front of the galaxy. Mess around with the contrast a little bit. Brightness and scale it up maybe. Maybe we'll add more complexity. We can also set the blending mode of the Milky Way to add. And then we can turn down the opacity to make it kind of subtle, because the Milky Way cloud's pretty faint. Yeah, that's looking good. Okay, now we got to color it. To color it, we're going to add a tritone. Tritone is like a more advanced tint. You can see that we can tint the highlights, midtones, and shadows separately. We're going to make the midtones kind of like a brownish orange. And then I'm also going to take the shadows, make them a little bit blue, like a dark, saturated blue. See what this looks like. Turn down the opacity some more. And look at that, we have a fully 360 Milky Way that we can kind of put in any sort of background of any sort of shot we want. Now, if you want to try something fun, like creating the wormhole from a certain sci-fi movie, you could apply a CC lens to the Milky Way fractal noise layer, which then distorts it and makes it look super cool. If you want to make it look like the Milky Way cloud is moving by or accelerating, you could animate the offset position of the fractal noise. If you offset this on multiple layers, it can create a really cool effect of like clouds moving by really fast as you accelerate through the wormhole. Let's move on to making a nebula. All right, we're going to be making this nebula here, and we're going to be using Red Giant Mirror, one of my favorite plugins. It's a very fun plugin to use. We're actually going to be starting out by using the same starry background we did. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new composition. We're going to call this Nebula. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring this star field that we just made. We're going to bring in the horizon and the starry reference layer. We need them both, and we're going to bring them into the nebula. Okay, so you can see that it's party mode. So we got to make sure that we got to go to image map, layer, starry reference layer, and bam, look at that. We have our stars, and we set the resolution full. Nice, fantastic. We are going to start by creating a layer for our nebula here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit right click, new, solid, type in nebula. Okay, it's a white solid, it's really bright. We're going to start by going to Red Giant Particles in 3D and looking for Mirror 3. We're going to drag this onto our layer here. Mirror is a plugin that can displace a mesh with a fractal, can create all kinds of really, really cool effects. If we go to fractal here, we can see that there's an amplitude tab. The more we turn up the amplitude, the more interesting the distortion is, and it creates these very interesting effects. I'm gonna go ahead and reset this and get this back to start. I'm gonna start by turning the amplitude at 0 because I just like to look at it when it's a plane. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna texture this with fractal noise. We can go ahead and create a new solid, apply fractal noise. Yeah, it turns out you can texture this plane right here with fractal noise. So we're gonna go down to texture, texture layer, and we're gonna set this to fractal noise, source, effects, and masks. And then we're gonna go to our fractal noise layer, and we need to apply a fractal noise to that layer. And now check that out. We have a texture layer. The reason why I'm doing this is because we are actually going to be distorting this plane into the shape of our nebula here. And I kind of want it to have a cloudy like surface. We're going to be adjusting this as we go. A lot of creating a nebula is it's a lot of dialing stuff in. So let's go ahead and just start diving straight into this. With the nebula, I'm going to start by rotating it over. I'm going to go to geometry, and underneath geometry, we can control the position, we can control the size, we can control the rotation. I'm going to rotate it to negative, we'll do negative 80, so we can still kind of see it a little bit. We are going to then go on down to fractal. And then we're going to start messing around with some of these distortion effects. One of them is the spiral. And if we turn this up a lot, it starts to spiral the mesh into kind of a galaxy-like shape. Kind of cool, right? I'm also going to play around with the amplitude and kind of until we get kind of a nice looking shape. You can see that the shape is very solid here. So we're going to try to mess around with the fractal type and see what the different looks provide. The reason why it's blowing out so much is because if you go down to the material tab, if I go to opacity, if I turn this down, you can see it starts to get a little bit more smokier. But then when the mesh is clipping on itself, it starts to kind of blend and get really, really bright. You'll also notice that the mesh is being kind of deformed in a very angular way that's very geometric, which doesn't necessarily look very soft and cloudy like a nebula. So we can go up to geometry and we're going to up the vertices X and Y. And the higher this number is, the more smoother the fractal is. And then when we turn down the opacity, it just starts to look kind of nice and cloudy. Look at that. Okay, so right now we could change the color and we could do that here, but I actually like to go in and change the color of the fractal noise. There is a really fun universe plugin called Spectralicious. Man, it's like, look at with a name like that, you really know what you want. Spectralicious, and it's underneath Red Giant Generators. We're gonna go ahead and apply that to the fractal noise. And look at that. It just looks like all sorts of rainbow stuff. If we go back to our nebula, I'm just going to pull up some reference. We can see that nebula has like these warmish colors. Some of them actually have blues in them, oranges, some greens, all sorts of fun colors. So I'm actually going to make this one. Let's go ahead and solo our fractal noise layer. Yeah, right now we're in party mode right now. Look at that. If I zoom in, you can see it light my face green. Okay, let's go ahead and change these colors. I'm going to go and choose a preset. There's a bunch of cool presets in here. I'm going to go with Edge of Night, but I'm going to change the colors to be more warm because I just like this color preset already. So I'm going to go to color 1, change this to a warmer color. And I keep changing these colors until I get something that I like. It's very kind of a cool color. One important thing is that we need to actually put the fractal noise after Spectralicious. That essentially means that the fractal noise will now be colored from Spectralicious. Make sure to set the blending mode of fractal noise to multiply. This lets the fractal noise blend effectively with Spectralicious. Okay, let's hide this layer and see what we're doing here. Nice. We can now, maybe we'll introduce maybe a little bit more red into some of these. Yeah, okay, there we go. More fiery. Awesome. So what we can do now is we're gonna go back to our nebula and we're gonna just kind of play with the opacity here until we get something that looks cool. We're also, let's just play around with the amplitude. The individual amplitudes are great because then you can only affect certain X, Y, or Z. So like, let's say if we want to stretch it out, or if we want it to be more like so. Frequency is also a great one to play around with. Oh yeah, if you want to get some really interesting shapes, you can use F bend X or F bend Y. Yeah, okay. So if you turn up the smooth normals, it kind of smooths out the surface of your nebula. One fun thing to play around with if you want more shadows in your nebula, there's actually an ambient occlusion intensity right here. And the more this gets turned up, the more shadows appear on your mesh. Okay, last thing, let's go ahead and create an adjustment layer. and then apply some optical glow. Love some optical glow. Turn up the size, turn down the amount, set it to highlights only, turn up that percentage so it's just the nebula. Make it really, really wide. And then maybe a little bit of radiate. Yeah, and then now we can kind of look around at our nebula here. Pretty fun. Okay, that's it for nebula. Let's go ahead and make a planet. Okay, let's start by creating a new composition. Let's create it planet. Yeah, with the exclamation mark. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the stars from our previous projects because, frankly, I want some stars to be behind. And we're back to Party Town. We keep showing up here. I don't know how we keep coming here. All right, let's go to Horizons, relink our star map, starry reference layer. It's back in action. Let's go ahead and also create a camera, new camera. Let's maybe make this like a 50 millimeter or something. I don't know. Then we can orbit around. Look at that. We got our stars. Okay, let's create a planet with geo. We're going to right click, create a new solid, and then we're going to call this geo planet. And then we're going to go ahead and apply geo. We'll go over here to Red Giant Particles 3D, go to geo, drag it on our layer. We get a sphere. Wow, look at that. We're done. Okay, let's speedrun how to create a planet. First, I need to import in a model that I'm going to use as my planet. It could just be a rounded model, but I've chosen here to import in a Saturn model. It's a kind of a sphere with a disk around it. And then going to start creating the texture for Saturn itself. I'm going to use fractal noise and stretch it out on the x-axis. Then I'm going to use a tritone effect to tint the highlights light tan and then the midtones to a dark brown. I then adjust the material settings so it's not as shiny, and then I add some subsurface scattering to make it seem like there's some cloudy surface on Saturn. I'm then going to start adding another fractal noise onto the rings and stretch that out as well. Add some optical glow at the end, and then bam, you got yourself a nice looking planet that looks like Saturn. Okay, so after dialing in my optical glow, I also added a 3D camera, and now we can orbit around our planet. We can now place this planet anywhere into our space scene, outside of a ship, maybe it's in the sky, maybe it's on the horizon. We've done a lot of things in this tutorial. We've done a nebula, we've done a starfield, we've done all sorts of really, really cool things. I'd like to thank you all for sticking around, and thanks for watching Intergalactic Forms. I'll see you in the next one when we create a light speed effect. Have a great rest of your day. My name is Blake Rizzo, and I'll see you in the next one.